Most people open Cowork, type something and just hope it works. And usually it does to a point, but the moment something goes wrong, Claude loses the trick, produce the wrong files, repeat itself, or the session gets sluggish. You have no idea why this happened. That's because you don't know what's happening underneath it. This lesson fixes that. We are going to cover two things in this video. First, how to use the interface, what each panel does, how to brief Claude, and how to stay in control. And second, we going further into the how session work and understand where the work runs, why session forget, what fill up the context, what happen when it get full. So you could use Cowork without knowing any of this, but once you do it, you will make much more good decisions about how you structure your work inside the Cloud Cowork. So let's start with the session. And a session is a single focused work conversation within Cloud inside Cowork. So if you come inside to Cowork and create click on the new task, it open a new session for you. You open a session, you write your first instructions here. So I can just upload it my instructions here, and from this point everything happen inside it. This is the session. Claude read your files, reason about the task, it take actions, and it produce the output files all within the same conversations. Think of it like working meeting with a very capable colleague. The meeting has a clear subject. Both of you are focused on it, and everything discussed in the meeting is on the table for the whole duration. And when the task is done, the session is done, the next task get its own fresh session. So one session, one task, that's the fundamental architecture of it. So when you open a session here, right? So when you open a session here, you see the four things on your setup screen. You see the brief, the prompt you give, the model you are using, the working folders, and your connector and the files. So if we go here, so this is the brief that I giving it. See on your screen when you running it. So let me load a folder first. So choose a different folder, and if I go here, I can just search for my folder. So I have this folder, and inside this folder I have these four files. So let me loading it, allow it. So we have the four files inside the folder. We mounted it here. This is the prompt that we giving us. So it's just asking about write the week community newsletter email, and we give the proper and specific instructions to it. It need to read the brand voice.md file to understand about tone and voice rules. Member win file where members share their wins and highlight from this week, and the weekly notes .md file that we have the transcript of the meeting, and also write the newsletter email. So right, and the structure, and also we want to save this as a word document called weekly newsletter, and this email should feel like came from real person. So these are the brief, right? We loaded our folders, right? We can connect our skills if needed, or also connect our connectors if needed here. And also we choose the Sonnet 4.6 model here. So these are the four things you should see when you open a new session. And once the session start, you are inside the main interface. So let me just send it. And once it running here inside it, we have four area. So first is the conversation panel, where you input it and you see the Cloud Cowork response. On the right side you have the progress tab, working folders, and the context tab. So let's go back to Cloud and understand each one by one. So as you see here, so this is the conversation panel where you write your initial brief, read Claude response it, and send follow-up instructions. Everything you want Claude to do, it get typed here. Your instruction, and once it completed work, it give you the response here. So this is your conversation panel. On the right side, you can see here, this is the progress tab. So when Claude receive your brief, so when it receive your brief, it break your main task into subtasks, and you can see all the subtasks here. Each subtask appear in the progress tab as a Claude work through it. So you can see here it complete the first task and it just cut down this list, and it's working on the second task to writing the newsletter and the third task, right? So you can, whenever you're working with a session, you open the progress tab immediately, watch the first or two, three subtasks. Is Claude reading the right files? So we ask for to read brand voice MD, member wins, and the weekly notes. So it correct. Is it heading toward the right output you described? So we ask it to write a newsletter email, so it going right in right direction and then saving the Word document format. But let's say we want to, we see it's not going in the right direction, so we can just stop it like this here and just give the feedback that need to be changed here, so we can see or monitor our progress here. The third thing you can see is the working folders. So the working folders, so you every file Claude can see and every file it create. So inside it, the main folder we have brand voice demo. So this is, I need to remove because this is not needed. We have four files here, and this one is newly created because we ask it to create a files with this name, but initially have this brand voice, the member wins, and also the weekly notes. So it read those three files, and once the file is created, is stored in the same folder as we see here. So if you see here, it already finished a task and it created the Word document. And so you can see we have the claude.md file that it already loaded whenever you open a new session. So, and read these three files, brand voice, member wins, and the weekly note, and also store the file that created in the same folder. So this is very important things to know. And also when Claude work on a copy of your folder, it's not editing your original files. The output it create land in the same panel and you can open them directly here. So you can click it here and you can open it here, right? And the last thing you can see the context tab. So this include all the memory. So when we are working on it, it stores some memory and we can see it here. It also use this docs skill to create the document file for us. So if you click on this docs, so it already have the skill.md. So you can see the description and all the thing that it needed. So it loaded this as well here. So skills are just the pre-configured sets that tell Claude how to perform a specific thing, right? So all are the four things that you see here. So conversation panel, your progress tab, your working folders, and the context here. It includes the skills. And if we connect our connectors, it also have it. So let me show you how this works as well. So we can on the connector and we can say here, okay, send an email to my own email address abdbhanu12 at the gmail.com to just taste it, create a draft and attach a docs file as well. So we just tell add a connector and just ask it to send a draft to this particular, it's my own email, and create a draft and attach a doc as well that we created now. So let's see how it loaded here in the context side as well. And I also show you one more thing here. You can see here build.js. So this is called a scratch pad. This is Claude internal working space. It's reasoning, notes, it's making to itself, intermediate thinking. You can expand to see how Claude approaching the task. So if you click it here, build.js, so you can see here how it think whenever it's working on your task, right? So this is the scratch pad that is stored only on this session for the cloud infrastructures. It's not stored in your original folder, because if you come here in original folder we have three files and this is the file that it created. It doesn't loaded this build.js, because this is the scratchpad that Claude uses for itself. Okay. And as you can see here, it already loaded the connector here as well as a Gmail when it's writing a draft for us. So this is the conversation panel, the progress tab, your working folders, the scratch pad inside the folder that Claude used, and in the context we have the connectors, skills, and also have the memory as well. So this is all about the interface of the Claude session. And the next thing you need to understand whenever you're working inside a session, your job in the every session is the three things: brief, monitor, and verify. So run this every single session, especially the last step. So first thing is your brief. So whenever you give any task to Claude, so this is the brief, right? And brief is just not the message. It's a structured set of instruction that tell Claude exactly what you need and what done look like. So you can see here, we can tell it exactly what files it need to read, how to structure our email, what is the final output look like to save in a Word document with the correct name, right? Because if you don't give the document type or proper name, it get confused or it gives the generic output. So this is very important. You need to describe what the output should look like. It is a single document, a folder of files, a specific note, a specific format. Because the more precise you give the input, the better it give you the output every time without exception, right? So this is very important about the brief. And the second thing is monitor. So once you give the brief, the second thing, you need to see the progress tab here. Claude will break your task into subtasks. Read them. Does the first subtask match what you asked for? Is Claude actually reading the right files that you want to use, or is it heading in right direction or not? Right? Once it's not, you can just click it here, stop it, and just give a feedback here. So it can stop here, because the early you catch a wrong turn, the cheaper is to fix. The one corrective message in the first 60 seconds costs to 10 seconds. A full correction after Claude has finished costs you another full run, right? You don't have to wait Claude to finish it. The conversation panel is always open. Send a message mid task if you need to. So you can just stop it and just give a feedback, right? This is the second thing you need to do. And last and very important thing is you need to verify your output. Once it completes its work, you need to actually open the file it created and actually read it. So let me go you through. So it generated this weekly newsletter for us. So you can actually open the file and just read the subject line, read what it writes in here, the format it uses, right? So you can see it writing the sign of here. You can ask it to write it here, right? So this is the most is precious step in the whole thing when you're working this at the session, and most people completely miss it. They see a completed output, it look bit rough, and they accept it. Then they send to a client and spot the mistake later on, right? So you can see you have the some mistakes here. The formatting is not right. It's like having this days, so it sound like an writing by AI. So all those things are you need to make, and just give a clear feedback to Claude to make those changes. And so here I can just show you the simple way. So remove all from weekly newsletter doc. So I just give a simple feedback to make those changes. But the most important thing you need to look for when you are verifying it, the first is hallucinated details. There are things Claude invented that sound plausible but are wrong. Names, date, statistics, product details, client name, client info, right? If Claude reference a specific things you didn't give it, verify that it's real or not. And the second is misinterpreted results. This is where the data is right but the conclusion is wrong. Claude read the right context, right information, but draw the wrong conclusions and presented it confidently. You need to catch these things as well. So if something is off, send specific feedback in the same conversation panel. Don't say this is not quite right. Say if the subject line is too formal and the second paragraph reference a feature doesn't exist. So you can remove both, right? So Claude will revise it in place. The session context is still fully intact and you don't lose anything, right? So this is the important thing that you need to take care of it whenever you're working inside the session. So brief, monitor and reply whatever session give you. And this is important rule whenever you're working inside a session. So make sure you're working one task for a one particular session, because if you do a lot of tasks in the same session, it get confused. And mainly two things happen. First, the context fill up with the noise. Every messages, every response, every file it read, all of it take space in the context window. When you are bouncing between three different tasks in one session, you are filling up the context window with the things that are irrelevant to the whatever Claude is working right now, right? So let's say we are just working here to write our email newsletter, right? So if you see, it remove all the daces, proper signing off. You can tell more by actually reading it, right? The actual numbers from your transcript, the actual price, right? You need to take care of these by completely verifying it. And once it done, right? So it have the folders files here. It have everything about the your input and the cloud response. But if you have multiple tasks here, let's say you want to send a proposal for newsletter automation or something, right? So these all the files are irrelevant to the newsletter automation proposal, right? And it just ate the context window. So you need a one task for the one session. And the second thing also happening there when you are working with multiple tasks in the same session. So we have the demo kit folder that have the cloud.md file and three files and also the file it created, right? So all the files here are relevant to our this task. But let's say you are asked it to create a proposal for a newsletter automation guy, and it create the proposal. The proposal is also stored in the same demo kit folder, right? So it means file from task 1 sit next to the file from task 2. You can't tell what finished, what draft, what has been revised. When you come back to continue something, it's hard to even find it, right? But now if you are working on the demo kit folder, you can see these three files that you are input and these are the file is created, but all the files are irrelevant, right? So you don't want to mix up all those things. So the clear version is one session, one task, and each session has a specific name as well. So you see here, weekly community newsletter, right? So this is the lesson how to use session, right? But this is not the right name, right? So you need to avoid the names that are not relevant, right? So as I saw you here as well, so you don't need to write a name like email draft, proposal edit. You need to clearly define the session is onboarding email for the school, right? YouTube script for MCP lesson. So you need to give a proper name. So it will help you when you come back and start working on the session again, right? You don't need to find the session again with confusing your names, right? So this is all about this first part. And this is the part where we cover the interface section. How, what are the things that you're seeing inside the cowork when you're working it. But if you go here, right, and inside the same thing there's one more thing going inside it. So we see the four panels: how to brief Claude, how to monitor a task, how to verify it. But now let's go more deeper, because once you understand what actually running underneath the two involvement, a finite context window, a mechanism that kick in when fill it of the context window, the rules we have just covered are not good practice. They become obvious to you. So let me show you the other section as well. So whenever you run a session, there's a two environment running in. Every Cowork session actually run in two places at once. Your local computer and a cloud sandbox. Understanding the split tell you where the data lives and what Cloud can do. So we have the local machine where it store your data, right? Your folders, your files, your session history, all of it is stored locally on your computer. So when we loading this, right, so we inside this folder demo kit and it uses these files and it create the file storage directly here. It store the session history in the same folder, right? So this is the local machine environment where it store every data in a your local machine folder. And here is a second environment is sandbox. So this is entropic infrastructure. It uses to run the code, take action on your behalf, like calling the API, tools or files, right? And with run code, it just run the code like Python, Node, Shell, CLI inside the same session. And both the environment are connected with using these mounted folders. So when you upload a folder here, right, so let's select this folder here. So this is the your local machine folder, and the files that created here, like it created this one, it uses the tools. You can see it used 6 tools, read files and loaded the tools, and then it runs some command like some script or use a skill as well, right? So all those things happening inside the sandbox environment inside the cloud, right? And once it created the file, it stored the same file in the same folder, right? So we use the mounted folder. So the sandbox need a source file, so it go to your local machine, it read the files, and it takes some action to run code or taking the API calls, and once it done, it output your file and store in the same local folder, right? So that's how the two environment are connected, and the all the files that store in your local machine is always stored in permanently in your machine, but the work we done inside the sandbox is destroy or is gone once the session is completed, right? So this is the permanent memory that is stored here, and this is just the memory that Claude use when working inside it, right? So and this is the build.js. You can see this file is a scratch pad that Claude uses to just store it, and it doesn't include in your working folder, right? So this is about the two environment. And the next thing we need to know about the sessions are fully isolated. So every session has its own environment, right? They don't share the memory, context, or state. So let's say on the session one, you're talking about the onboarding email draft. Session two, you client proposal edit, and session three is video script outline. So all three data that we store during the files is stored locally, but they don't share the context, right? So every session start fresh. History is just stored locally on your machine and not in your Anthropic cloud, right? So what this mean in practice? Context you build up in your session burn does not carry to session 2. Every session start from zero, which is why your Claude.md instructions matter so much. Because if you go to your Claude dot settings and Cowork, and these are the instructions, right? So as you see here, this is the instruction that I uses and store for about myself, about my client, my how I talk, right? Everything it. So whenever you open a new session here, so let's say I just ask it who I am, right? And my target audience. So I just give a simple prompt or a brief. It doesn't load any folder, any files, nothing, right? But it just read your Claude.md file and just tell you about yourself, your target audience, right? So every session when you start, Claude.md file is always running, always loaded, right? So this is you need to understand here. And the next thing, how the context window is work. So context is just a working memory of a session, right? So let's say we are working in the session and it have some context window, and after the one once the context window is fill up, Claude start to hallucination and it give you the wrong answers, right? So whenever you do inside this session, it have the some fixed context window, and it's have the limited capability. So let's understand what are the things that include inside the context window. So first, this is the claude.md file. It loaded always inside every session you starting it. The second is your instructions and your every messages. So this is the brief that I give. So this loaded inside my context window. This include all these messages I give us, and also third, it include the Cowork response. So every answers Cowork produce, it fill the context, including the reasoning it does before it writing a reply, right? So it include everything. So you can see here it give us this output, right? So it include all those files inside the context window limit, and it include these as well, right? So this include in the inside the context window. The fourth is your mounted files. So if you go here and we loaded this folder here, so let's say we load this folder with AI practice, okay? So it include the files that you create, the files and the folders you mounted here. You can add a file here as well, right? So let's say I use this file. So it include this file, the folder that you mind. It include everything inside the clo inside the context window. And one more thing I need to clear about what include when we mount a folder. So we have the with AI practice folder here, and if you go to with AI practice folder here, so here we have the 35 files, including the files and the demo kit folder and all other two folder as well, right? So when you mount this folder, right, it doesn't loaded all the 35 files and folder inside the same context session, right? So because it just loaded the file that it access it or it read it, right, whenever it working in a session. So you can see here this is the file that already loaded every session. So it loaded three files: brand voice, member wins, and the weekly notes. So if you go here, so all the files store in this demo kit folder, and it just read these three files. It doesn't read all the rest of the files. It doesn't consume all the context about all these files into the same session, right? So this is very important thing that you need to understand. So when you mount a folder, it loaded only the file that it needed when it's working. It doesn't load every single file that is stored in your folder, right? So this is very important about mounting the files. And the last thing is your skills and the connectors. So when you're working it, so you can see here we have this skill to create the doc file, and it loaded also inside your context window. So if you click it, so it have also doc.md file that have this old text here, right? You can see here. So it loaded this as well whenever you are working inside the co-work session, okay? And also it include the connectors that you use. So turn off the connector that you are not using it, turn off the skills that you are not using it, and very specific about the file that you need to use, right? Because if you just let it be cloud use everything, it just loaded everything, and you can pay more money for more tokens, right? So this help you to understand what are the include in the context window and what not. So and also you need to know about the which model you need to choose. So when you are working here, so open a new task, we have multiple options, right? So right now we have Haiku one, Sonnet, and Opus, and you can change the model here as well. So these three model we have to choose when you are working inside the cowork. And these models have different context window, speed, cost, and intelligence. And the real trade-off right now is intelligence versus cost, not the context size. So if you are having the small task like extracting some data from a spreadsheet, you can use this Haiku cheaper one for the quick task, right? And for the balance default is your should be Sonnet. So for the most of the tasks that creating a presentation or drafting an email, the most of the basic tasks that we are doing with this Sonnet one. And lastly, we have the Opus one. This is for the larger or hard tasks that are more complex, right? and it take load of multiple reasoning, then you need to use the Opus one. But if you don't know to sure what to use, so I just suggest use this Sonnet one as a default one. And all the three models have like context size is really deciding factor, right? It's not deciding factor. Pick the model by the intelligence need and the cost tolerance. Sonnet is almost for everything that I use, but you can use Opus when the tasks generally demand deeper reasoning, right? So you need to choose the right model when you're working it. And also the next concept I need to tell you about. So let's say we have these all things when you are working in a session, and if the context window fill it, right? So right now you can see this is the part, this is remaining. But let's say it fill up all, and now you don't have any context window to talk to Claude in the same session. So when this going to be happen, Claude automatically run this command called compaction, right? So it just compact all your conversations, all your key decisions into the quick summary, right? So let's say you have multiple steps here, and when you are approaching the limit, Claude automatically run this compaction command, and it just give a summary of all the steps that you are taking here. So it is better to understand what are the things that include in the summary. So your key decisions, the file you created, the task outcome, and the general direction of the work, right? But some of the concept or the context is going to be loose, like your exact wording, your intermediate step that you took, your mid task changes, right? So these are the things that lose when you have the summary or Claude run this compaction command. Yeah, this is all about how the session work. You need to use one task per session and keep the session short and focused. Be intention with Claude.md because this is the file that loaded every single time when you are working inside the Claude Cowork. And if it's drafting, right? So let's say you're talking to Claude Cowork session and its context window is already filled up. You notice Claude start hallucination and it give the wrong output. It not follow your rules. So instead of just fixing it, you can open a new session and just start working on it. Okay, and pick the Sonnet is your default model. And also session histories are local, not on the cloud, so you can store as a backup as well. You can use GitHub. So this is all about how the session and interface and your role look like. And we also go deeper inside the how session work. So now you understand how everything working inside the Claude Cowork. And see you on the next video. Thanks.